Alright, hi everyone, welcome to a new tutorial here on Patreon. This month we're going to be focusing on birds. So I'm going to be doing a colored pencil bird piece and a pastel bird piece. In pastels we're going to do an owl, and in colored pencil today we're going to do a kingfisher. So it was hard to choose a reference. I also had two macaws picked out, and both the kingfisher and the macaws gained equal votes. So I had to choose, and I went for the kingfisher, although I really like the macaws as well, so maybe for the future, I don't know. But today we're going to do the kingfisher. I have, as always, my Canson 1557 paper with me. I have my polychromos, colored pencils, and then we'll also be working with some luminance. As always, the white one, of course. But then I also have some other colors picked out that I think will be a nice addition to the polychromos colors this time. Very colorful colors. Here I have middle cobalt blue 660, and I have scarlet number 70. But of course the full color list will be available as well. In the polychromos I have all kinds of blues and violets picked out, reds and oranges, and yeah, we'll see how far we get with these. I have my lines already drawn out. We're going to start with the head. I'm working on, what is it, 9 by 12 inches, I think. So it's going to be a portrait mode drawing. And we're going to start off with the head. I have it sketched out here, very light, as you can see. Hope you can see it. I always like to tape down my drawing with tape. This is Scotch removable tape. So I always do that so it doesn't move. And this is also going to be my very first full tutorial project in my new studio. So I hope everything goes well. It's very stormy today. I hope you can't hear that too much. I also still need to figure out the lighting a bit. When it comes to additional materials, I have my kneaded eraser by Maped. Then I have the Tombow Mono Zero eraser, which I'll probably be using as well. Then for sharpening, I today have Bruinzeel pencil sharpener, very simple one. I like to try out different types of these. These simple ones always seem to work the best for me. So those are my materials for today. Let's get started. So I always start off with the eye because it's, in my opinion, the most important part of an animal project. So we're going to start off with the eye. I'm going to start off with using black for that. The eye area is a very dark area, making sure it's very sharp as well. Can you hear the storm? Unfortunately, the weather hasn't been cooperating well. The lighting is really bad, the wind is really loud, but I need to get started with the tutorial now, otherwise I just won't be able to make it in time. Okay, so I'm going to take the black polychromos and outline the eye. Using very thin lines. I don't draw a lot of birds. I think that this will be my first bird in colored pencil. So also for me, this is new. These are the very outer lines of the eye. We'll be filling in the details later. And then I'm moving on to the inner lines that I see, also the outline of the highlights in the eye. Sketching that highlight out. And then the bottom eyelid. I'm going to be working with a lot of black in the eye, as it is just such a dark area. But even with birds, it's also very important to show a bit of character. The eyes are so important for character, and even birds do show some character. Drawing around the highlights. And then I'm going to give the eye a basic base layer of black. I'm going to be a little less heavy in the center of the eye, just so I can layer some other color on top. I'm going to be layering some violet on top of it probably, just to give it more color, because only black is going to look very flat and I don't want that, so I am going to mix in another color with the black. And of course the highlight also has a lot of different colors in it as well. Alright, so that is the base layer for the eye. Now I'm going to pick magenta, number 133, sorry, 133, I hope you can see it. Just layer some of that on top of the black. This is going to be a very colorful drawing, so I'm going to try to put in as many different colors in there as possible. You can see what kind of effect that gives. It's already a lot more deep looking. I'm going to switch to Delft Blue 141. This is a really nice purplish blue. Going to add that on top. And I'm also going to use this in the highlight later on. Using small circular motions. Alright. Going to add some of that to the bottom eyelid. Very lightly. And now it has a lot, enough layers on it to be burnished. Do want to make sure that the highlight has the right shape to it. A little bit of adjusting with the kneaded eraser. As long as you haven't burnished yet, you can do still a bit of erasing. Alright, I'm taking the white luminance. I'm going to burnish the center of the eye. So I'm not going to focus on the edges, but on the center. Just to blend in the blue and the magenta with the black. Alright. Going to switch back to black and darken up the edges some more. Then maybe a little bit of dark indigo top of the eye. Alright, now we have to color the highlights, and those are very purplish looking. I'm going to take some of that Delft Blue again, 141, and I'm going to color in this small highlight right there. Add a little bit of on top of that, and I'm going to add a light layer on the big highlight. And the upper part of the highlight is the lightest, so I'm leaving open a small strip. Then on top of that Delft Blue, I'm going to add some violet for that extra purplish look. And this is number 138. Just lightly layer that on top. A little bit more of that Delft Blue in the center. I really like this color. Then I'm going to do a little bit of burnishing there with the white. Focusing mainly on the lower part of the highlight, leaving open the top strip. Also the smaller one. And then I'm going to clean up the edges of the highlight with black. create a little bit more shape in there. Alright, let's leave the eye for now. I want to move on to the beak. Okay, so the beak is also very interesting. A lot of different colors, mostly blues and purples again. Also some oranges. So let's get started with the beak. So first, I feel like it's the most important to make sure that the center line of the mouth is in place. So for that, I'm going to take black again. Let's draw in the line of the mouth. Not pushing super hard, I just want to get that line in there. That line continues all the way to about there. Then underneath the eye, we have a very dark shape. So with black, I'm going to sketch that out, that shape that's outlining the beak. All the way to the nostril. Color that in lightly. Alright, and then for the outline of the beak, I want to do a little bit of black on the lower edge, just to outline it. But I am going to go over with another color. Right, and then the top half I'm going to outline with blue. As you can see, a blue strip on the beak. Let's do making sure that the outlines are very light so they don't get in the way. Ultramarine blue. With that I'm going to outline the top half of the beak. Then the tips I'm going to do with grey, as the tip of the beak is quite light. This is School Grade 2. Alright, so now we have the outer edges ready. I want to start filling in the darkest areas on the beak first. So those are the nostril and the bottom half. I always like filling in the darkest parts first. Very loud wind at the moment. For the nostril, I'm going to do red. As you can see, a red glow in there. So I'm going to start off with a base layer of red and then add the darker colors on top. So I'm going to start with deep red to 23. And then to give the nostrils a tighter outline, I'm going to add black and color in the inside of the nostril with that. And then the nostril connects back to this dark shape, which we're going to be completing later on. Little bit of burnishing on the upper edge of the nostril. Make it blend a little bit more. Alright, and then let's move on with the bottom half of the beak. A lot of deep colors I see, a lot of black it seems, but also a lot of purple. And you can also see a lot of different shapes in the beak, so I also want to put those in. So let's get started. I want to get started again with that Delft blue. which I really like. Going to use that as a base tone. Going to use it mostly at the bottom. And then I also need to draw around all those shapes that I see. Little damages on the beak. I'm being quite loose with this. Going to leave open the highlights. I'm going to do the same on the top half. Put a base tone there where it's the darkest. Putting in all those shapes and lines that I see. Alright, let's pick a darker color now. I still don't want to use black at the moment, so I want to go over with Kaput Mortem Violet, which creates a really nice deep color on top of the Delft Blue, almost a brownish color. I want to deepen it before I go over with black. Alright, I want to add some more blue now. So I want to move on with Cobalt Blue. And with that I want to create a base layer on the lighter parts of the beak. Very light though, because I want to add other colors on top as well. Cobalt Blue is number 143. I'm now basically focusing on blocking in all the shapes that I see. So now to contrast the amount of blue, I'm going to add some violet on top. So this violet again, 138. And just lightly glaze that on top of the blue. Just to tone down the vibrancy of the blue a little bit. Then the rest of the beak, It's going to be red. This is this is Deep Scarlet Red 219. Just blocking in shapes. And on the bottom, some terracotta. Okay, so now parts of the beak are still not dark enough. So now I'm going to work with black. I'm going to darken up especially the bottom. It's all about the contrast here. Now I can also start focusing a bit more on textures. Alright, and then here and there I can also find some orange on the beak. So for that I'm going to take terracotta again. This is number 168. I hope you can see that. 86, I mean. And it adds a little bit of that here and there. A little bit of magenta, a bit of glazing. I'm really going all out with my colors. A little bit of indentarine blue. Okay, and now I'm going to do burnishing to get rid of the paper texture and blend all the colors together. I'm going to burnish the bottom half separately from the top half so that I don't smudge the two halves together. So I'm being very careful to not go over the black middle line. And don't be afraid while burnishing. Usually after burnishing there's still some room to make adjustments. Alright, I'll be working some more on the tip later. So that's all the burnishing I'm doing for now. Now I'm going back in with black because I've lightened up a lot of the color. So let's get over that middle line one more time, just to make it really dark. And darken up the bottom section one more time. Now I can also focus some more on the textures and the shapes. Now that the paper texture is gone. Alright, that beak is starting to look quite nice now. Still, it needs a little bit more detail. I keep looking at the reference. I keep comparing the contrast and the shapes with my own drawing. Sometimes I take a few minute break just to look at it. That really helps to see what needs to be adjusted. Okay, so now I want to take the Tombow and do some detailing with the Tombow. So I make sure to take a knife and cut it off. To a sharp tip like that. Then with the Tombow I can do some highlighting. Create some of those damages on the beak. That makes it look quite a bit more realistic. Making short movements. I don't push very hard, but I do make very short movements. Try to rub off a bit of that color. Alright, and now I do want to put some more color here on the top half. That still needs some adjusting. Not super happy yet with how that looks. First I want to take light gray number 2. Do a little bit more work on adjusting the shape. Now I want to go back in with purple. Let's do violet. And just glaze some more purple. On the beak. Leaving open the very top edge. I want that to be blue. But the middle section gets some more violet. Doing some more work on the tip. Burn one last time. Smoothen out the harsh lines. Then the beak is more or less finished. Can always come back to it later. But for now I like the look of it. So now I'm going to continue to the feathers. Alright, so let's move on with the feathers now. So first, before doing that, I want to sketch out some of those shapes here. I'm taking cool gray number 233. And here you can see some patterns, some shapes. So I'm sketching those out. So just like with drawing fur, make sure to draw in the right direction. So the direction of the feather growth. And here we have the edge of the beak, which is also a bit grayish, so I'm also filling that in with gray. Small circular motions. And then it will transition into the blue. So it's all about creating the right textures. We're not going to copy every single feather. That's not really necessary. But we are going to focus on recreating the texture. So we also have to finish this little part. Sketched out the shapes. Now here on this very dark part, I'm going to add some purple to give it some more depth. Let's do some magenta first. Circular motions. The storm is getting real wild now. And then I'm going to take that really nice blue again, Delft blue, glaze that on top, pressing a little bit harder so that we don't have to do any burnishing. You can see that creates a really nice deep black color. Now with Kaput Mortem Violet, I'm going to create the shadows in between these little feathers. And here we have a part that is more gray. And here we have three little pieces that are more orangey toned. So I'm going to use Sanguine for that. Sanguine is a really nice natural orange tone, not too vibrant. I'm going to put down a base layer, making sure to go in the right direction. create some more shadow there, I'm going over with burnt sienna, which is a red toned brown, which works really nicely as a shadow color. A little bit of terracotta for a bit more vibrancy. And then for the grayish feathers, I'm just going to add some shadow here with 233. Recreate that pattern. And then with black I can clean up the shapes of those feathers. I'm doing a tiny little bit of burnishing on the orange tones mostly to blend them together. Not necessarily on the black and the gray, just on the orange. Then I can create some texture on top of that with sanguine again. Of course, it's a very small area, so it doesn't have to be super detailed, but I do want to get the right texture in. And then it's time to start with the blue feathers on the head. I'm going to start with dark indigo, just to outline the orange section a little bit. Dark indigo is a very dark blue. I'm going to use it around the orange. To create the base tone. Also around the eye, a little bit. And then from there we can start adding the patterns and the textures. Though it's not quite dark enough, so I'm going on top with black to make this edge even more dark. Alright, so now for the feathers on the head, I'm going to start off with the lightest color that I see. So with that I'm going to put down a base tone, then I can add the darker tones on top. So the lightest tone I see in there is a very light blue. Which is a bit of a mixture between cobalt turquoise, number 154, and a light phthalo blue, number 145. So I'm going to use these two, I think, as a base tone. Going to start with a light phthalo blue. It's more of a bluish blue, a cooler blue. This one is leaning more towards green. I'm going to put down a super light layer. Really, really light. And I'm not worrying about the shape of the feathers yet. I just want to put down an even layer of this. Following the growth of the feathers and the shape of the head. So by putting down a base layer like this, it will become easier after that to decide what to do next. So it's always good to have a plan and to separate your drawing, to work in steps. Being super light. Still making sure to keep looking at my reference to see in which direction the feathers are growing. All the way around the eye. Of course, this is going to be darkened up a lot. And then we have these orangey cheeks. Making sure to already draw that shape in with the blue a little bit by drawing around the feathers. And here we have a very blue area as well. So let's also put down a base layer here. Right, so now we have a nice blue base layer. Now we can start working on top of that. Let's add a bit of that turquoise color, number 154. Glaze a little bit of that. Just a little bit. To give the feathers a little greenish glow. I'm trying to not go too dark. So now the base layer is done, and now we can start adding the patterns in the feathers, dividing all those little fuzzy feathers. And the color I'm going to start doing that with will be, I want to take a nice vibrant blue. Let's go with cobalt blue first. So I'm not going in yet with the very darkest blue, but I'm going for cobalt blue. I'm going to work slowly from light to dark. Still, my pressure is very low. I'm not going to add a lot of pressure yet. Otherwise I won't be able to add as many colors as I want to. Drawing fuzzy feathers like this is very similar to drawing fur. But now you really have to look and work in shapes, not necessarily in drawing hairs or individual hairs, but work in shapes. So you can see what those patterns are like. All those feathers are folded on top of each other. I really have to follow the curves of the head, otherwise it will look off. So I'm drawing tiny little strokes. Creating all those different feathers. I'm using this part as a guide. Keep looking at my reference, see if my strokes are still going in the right direction. You can see that this pattern is starting to appear now. And then here above or next to the eye, the pattern is a little bit different. Feathers are growing upwards more, so I'm using upwards motions, like that. Also working on the edges a bit, making sure to make some feathers stick out a bit, to make it look very fluffy. And this is still the sketch, to make sure that we have all the patterns in place. Alright, so now you can see that although we haven't put in a lot of colors yet, you can already see the curves of the head and the of the feathers, and that's what I wanted to do for these first layers. So now it will become a lot easier to add the other colors on top and to really make it a detailed drawing. So that's a good thing to remember. Always start with an underlayer, then start building the textures and the shadows on top. Alright, so I'm now going to go in with Helio Blue Reddish, number 151. And I'm going to start darkening up all these feathers. But as you can see on the reference, the centers of all these feathers are lighter. So I'm going to darken up mostly the edges of the feathers. And I'm leaving the centers light. Then at the end I can always darken up the center some more, put some more color in there. But now I want to make sure that all the edges of the feathers are darkened up, so I can then judge how dark I can go with the lighter areas. So I'm just drawing light strokes, not putting in a lot of pressure. These feathers are very small and very fluffy. Not very different when it comes to drawing techniques from drawing fur. I'm still just drawing tiny strokes, just like I would do with drawing fur. So it's not that different actually. You can hear the birds in the background. The birds from outside. Lots of birds here. And of course we have the back side of the head, which is a lot darker. And we have these feathers here behind the eye that are going more in an upwards motion. So I'm changing my strokes to be more upwards there. And I'm just lightly building up the colors this way. It's not the correct blue yet. I'll be adding a lot more blues. Also here on the bottom, adding these same textures. And here on the edge here, the feathers become longer and thinner. So I just draw strokes. Alright, we've got more texture in there now. Now it's time to get the shadows really dark. And let's see, I see some purplish tones in there, so I think I'm going to add Delft Blue 141, making sure it's really sharp as well. Let's go over these shadows again. Going to do the same, darkening up the edges of the feathers by drawing small tiny strokes. Delft Blue is really nice, dark purplish blue. I'm not going to add it everywhere, otherwise it will look flat. I just want to get that glow in there, that glow of different colors, so I'm going to add it on some of the feathers, not on every one. Especially here on the back of the head, I see a lot of purple. Varying a little bit in the direction of my strokes. Also on top of the head. Dividing some of those feathers a little bit more. Alright, darken up this bottom section a little bit more as well. Now slowly the texture of the feathers is starting to appear. Alright, now I want to add some more of the vibrant blue that you can see in the centers of all these feathers. So I want to go back in with another layer of light phthalo blue, number 145. I'm going to just add another layer on top of everything. Making sure to leave some strokes open, some feathers a little bit lighter, so that you get that shiny glow in the feathers. I want to make sure that there is variation in every one of those feathers. So the feathers that are lighter, I leave lighter, and the other ones I darken up a little bit. Alright, it's starting to look more dense now. And let's add more darkness now as well, because now we've darkened up the medium tones. I feel like the contrast can be higher in the feathers. I'm going with Indanthrine Blue now, 247. It's one of the darkest blues in the Polychromos line. And again, I'm going to darken up the base of those feathers and the edges. So I'm doing this very slowly, the darkening. Create some more contrast between the different feathers. Going to focus more on the back of the head now. Where the feathers are a lot darker. Like right here. Little detail behind the eye. Little detail behind on the head, on the back of the head. So we're going to work towards the small details now. Alright, so now I want to go in with an even darker color. And I'm probably going to go in with dark indigo, which is the darkest blue. I'm going to really darken up all the shadows. And I'll probably need to add another color on top as well. Maybe some black even. But I'm going to save that for the very last. Going to use the dark indigo on the very darkest parts. add in some really dark strokes. And I still have to keep an eye on the shape of the feathers to see if they are still going in the right direction, following the shape of the head. If the feathers are in the right shape, the head will look 3D. And if they are the wrong shape, the whole shape of the head will look off, so I don't want that. Alright, let's keep it like this for now. I want to add some more vibrant blue in there. I feel like it's not quite vibrant enough, and now I'm going to switch to the Caran d'Ache. So this is number Mule Cobalt Blue 660. Hope you can see that. I will list it as well in the color list. Caran d'Ache are regularly a little bit more vibrant than the polychromos. I'm going to add this for some extra vibrancy in the feathers. Not everywhere. And this is a really nice blue. I don't get to use such vibrant blues so often because I usually draw animals with a lot of brown tones in them and not really those vibrant tone animals. So this is really fun for the change. I do have to be careful to not darken up everything too much. Still want to get those light parts in there. I don't want to fill those up. It's already kind of happening a little bit, so I need to watch out for that. But it's starting to look quite nice now, and I'm not going to do a lot to it anymore. I'm not going to do burnishing either, I think. Maybe a little bit on this bottom part. Want to add a little bit more of that turquoise color, cobalt turquoise number 151. A little bit more of that on the lighter parts of the feathers. And then here I want to add some more Let's go for a phthalo blue there, 110. Just to fill this up a little bit more lightly before I do a little bit of burnishing here. Alright, I'll get the white luminance, making sure it's sharp. I'm going to do a little bit of blending just to get rid of that paper texture a little bit, smoothen all those feathers. Being careful though, going in between the feathers a little bit. I don't want to smudge everything out. I do want to keep that texture in there. A little bit also as well on the centers of the feathers. Not on the edges, but on the centers. I don't want to lighten up the edges too much. But I do want to smoothen out the centers. Not too much though. Tiny little bit of black. But just a little bit around the eye to make sure there's enough shadow around the eye. We've put in all those blues already, so this will prevent the black from looking too. Alright, a little bit more blue. Cobalt blue. Hype up the vibrancy. Just a little bit more. After burnishing, everything gets flattened out a little bit, so I want to put back in some of that vibrancy. Make sure that every feather is divided. I also want to add a little bit of purple. Let's go back in with that Delft blue, which is not entirely purple, but a little bit. Just to add some more darkness, but also add some color variety, so that it's not all just blue. Also a little bit of purple. The lighting is changing all the time. It's been dark and gloomy outside for more than 1 week now, non-stop, so it's really hard to film with good lighting at the moment. but it's supposed to get better in a couple of days. Maybe pull out some highlights with the Tombow eraser. Just a little bit of highlighting. Don't have to push hard. I just want to lighten up some feathers to enhance the glowy look. Alright, so that is it for the feathers on the head for now. I can always come back to it later if I see something that needs adjustment. Now I'm going to fill in this nice and orange cheek. The colors I'm going to use for that are terracotta, some cadmium orange 115, and I also want to add in a base tone, and I'm going to do that with a light yellow. This is dark chrome yellow 109. I'm going to start out with that dark chrome yellow, add in a nice light base tone. Really nice color. I'm really enjoying working with all those vibrant colors. I need to do it more often. And that orange cheek, it ends about there. Then I'm going to move on to step 2, which is dark cadmium orange 115. Suddenly the lighting is also changing a lot again. So with this I want to be a little bit more careful. I don't want to fill up the whole area with this right away. I want to start adding detail, adding the feather detail. So I'm looking at the reference to see in which direction feathers are growing. They are going in all kinds of directions actually. So I want to focus on adding the shadows now. Alright, moving on to terracotta, which is a little bit darker. And I might also add some brown on top of it later for the darkest shadows. Yep, I'm going to add some, let's go for Venetian red, as I also see a little bit of a reddish tone in there. Not only orange, also some reddish. This is 190. Venetian red. darken up the shadows a little bit. Keep it light. And then for the very, very darkest tones, I will be adding some burnt sienna 283. Just some small strokes here and there. Especially here underneath the eye. Now we can also finish the details on the beak here. Didn't really finish that yet. Finish the mouth. Suddenly it's starting to look a lot more like a bird. Now we can finish the transition between the different areas, between the beak and the feathers and the eye and the feathers. Make sure that everything comes together and becomes a whole instead of all different sections. Using dark indigo now. And I need some more purple right there. So I'm going to add more violet. Bit on the feathers as well. Just get a nice transition between the beak and the rest of the head. Now we of course also have this very white section. I want to leave that white for now. And this white section as well. So I want to do the breast area first and the wings. And then finish the whitest areas last. Because it's always easier to finish the dark sections first and then judge how dark you can go with the very lightest parts on the drawing, which are the white sections on the cheek and below the beak here. So let's do that first. Move on to the body.